Welcome to another All Israel News Update. I'm Hanan Lishinsky, and if you've been wondering these past couple of days why the small country of Yemen has been in the headlines basically all the time, and especially in regards to Israel, we're here to try to give you an overview of what's happened and why the small country of Yemen is making headlines all of a sudden. Now, all of this started back in October when the Houthi rebel group, which is a terrorist group based in Yemen, started to shoot projectiles, rockets and drones and missiles at Israel in support of Hamas. Now, all of their attacks basically came to a head 3 days ago when one single drone made the whole travel basically from Yemen, which is 2,000 kilometers south of where we're standing right now. Somehow this small drone managed to fly over the Red Sea, over Africa, over Egypt, and then reach Tel Aviv, killing one Israeli man and wounding 4 more and shocking a few other citizens. So this is basically the situation we were in 3 days ago. So this drone strike by the Houthis in Yemen was the first time that they successfully penetrated Israeli air defenses. They penetrated very deeply into Israel and even managed to kill one Israeli man. And this, of course, shocked Israelis. Now, it's important to say that as Israelis, of course, we think it's the same if an Israeli dies in the north of the country or in the center of the country in Tel Aviv. But the symbolic significance of this attack was, of course, much larger, which then led to the Israel Air Force conducting one of the most remarkable operations these past few months in response to this. Saturday evening, dozens of Israeli planes made the whole way that the drone made in the direction of Israel back to Yemen. They flew towards Yemen and apparently from over the Red Sea fired a barrage of bombs and missiles at the Yemeni port of Hodeidah. This is a port on the Red Sea in western Yemen. And Israeli officials later explained that this target was chosen because this is the port where the Houthi rebel group receives its weapons, and also it has oil storage facilities where the rebel group receives much of its economic revenue through this port. So this was a very important port, and maybe you saw the pictures. There were large fireballs, large explosions in this port city, and some of those fires are even burning. They might be burning until now. So massive fire, massive strikes, and Israel's defense minister Gallant said that these fires were seen all over the Middle East, and they were intended to send a message to the Houthi rebels and also to all of their allies in Iran and Hezbollah and all the other militias in the Middle East, that this was a red line that was crossed and this will not continue in this way. Now, if you want more background information on this rebel group, you can go to allisrael.com. We have a very detailed article explaining the background and the history of this group, but suffice it to say for now that this is a rebel group that is mainly comprised of Shia Muslims, the same sect that the Iranian Shia Muslims belong to. More or less there are differences, and they were formed in the 90s but took over large parts of Yemen, of this war-torn country on the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, in 2014. Since that time there has been a lot of wars and a lot of conflict. Saudi Arabia is involved, the United Arab Emirates were involved. The US is backing one of the governments there, but again, the Houthis took over part of Yemen, have controlled this part of Yemen, and one of their main backers, one of their main funders, and one of the main sources of their equipment and weapons is Iran. Now, as I said earlier, there is this religious connection between them. They are both Shia Muslims, but the Iranian regime has been building its so-called axis of resistance. And take note, if you're an American, the resistance is against Israel, but also mainly against the US and what they're seeing as US influence over the region. Now, this axis of resistance, the Houthis are part of it. Many of the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq are part of it. There are militias in Syria as well. And of course, the crown jewel of this whole operation, of this whole axis, is Hezbollah. Now, there are even reports suggesting that Hezbollah has been directly involved in the Iranian assistance to the Houthis, as well as Hezbollah has been directly aiding the Houthis. So there are connections. Also, recent reports that we also had on allisrael.com showed that the Houthis are trying to deepen their ties not only with Hezbollah, but also with Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. So you have to understand that this is a whole network of militias being funded and equipped by Iran, and their main goal is to threaten Israel, to attack Israel, to remove Israel, and eventually what they see as the US-led coalition and the US influence over the whole region of the Middle East. So through Iranian funds and Iranian equipment, weapons, drones, rockets, missiles, and so forth, these Yemeni Houthi rebels, who started as a small group somewhere in the hills of Yemen, have become a serious military threat. And after October 7, when they declared their support for Hamas, they started shooting missiles and drones at Israel. Now, most of them were intercepted, most of them even outside of the Israeli territory over the Red Sea. But since the Houthis also began threatening shipments, shipping through the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, which are adjacent to Yemen, they have not just become a nuisance for Israel, but a big factor really impacting shipping lanes through the Red Sea, one of the most important shipping lanes in the world. Now, this has led to the creation of a coalition of forces led by the US and several other Western nations, aimed to secure the shipping lanes and combat the Houthi rebels. So since they started attacking Israel, Israel has barely responded at all. Officially, it hasn't responded at all. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it seems like Israel left responding and combating the Houthis to this international coalition, while of course concentrating on its issues on other fronts. On the northern front with Lebanon and Syria, and especially on the southern front with Gaza, of course. But this coalition so far hasn't found success, hasn't found a way to stop the Houthis from their attacks. And the nature of the Iranian-produced equipment that they have, mainly Iranian-produced equipment, and it's the cheap way that these weapons can be produced, enable the Houthis to just go on sporadically once a week, a couple of times a week, to launch a very cheap drone, a very cheap rocket or missile, either at ships or at Israel, and continue to do so, and they have continued to do so for the past months without this coalition having found a way of stopping this. Now, the lack of deterrence can maybe most clearly be seen in the fact that even after Israel's first and massive attacks in the port of Hodeidah, huge fireballs, dozens of civilians killed, even more wounded, according to reports from Yemen, obviously, that even then the Houthis decided to launch another ballistic missile, a large-scale ballistic missile from Yemen at Israel. Now, this was intercepted by Israel's Arrow 3 air defense system, a long-range air defense system and one of Israel's best. So the missile was intercepted over the Red Sea and didn't reach Israel, but this was a signal that the Yemeni Houthi rebels don't intend to stop, and there is more needed to stop this rebel group from continuing its actions in Yemen. So for the meantime, it seems that this issue will accompany us further in the coming months. Inside Israel, there are several consequences of this whole Yemeni Houthi story. Now, for one, the successful, somewhat successful at least, strikes of Israel against Yemen have caused many in Israel to again demand more forceful actions against not just Hamas and Hezbollah, the main targets of Israel's military actions these past months, but also against all the other Iranian-backed militias across the whole region that have attacked Israel. Now, remember that Israel has also been attacked from Syria. It has regularly been attacked by drones and other projectiles from Iraq as well, and from Yemen, of course, as well. So this is the first time that Israel has responded, and many in Israel are saying that Israel should act more forcefully against those other foes, as well as the main backer, the head of all of those tentacles, which is Iran, of course. Now, another aspect of this is that inside Israel, as we mentioned earlier, of course, in northern Israel, people have been receiving drone strikes on their heads for months now. and Israel has responded against Hezbollah, but not in a forceful way that many of the residents of northern Israel would have liked to see. Many of those residents in northern Israel continue to be evacuated, and they demand, many of them even demand, a war and a ground invasion inside Lebanon to finally end the drone strikes, the rockets, and the missile attacks from Lebanon against Israel, and northern Israel especially. Now, in the international arena, especially regarding the relations between Israel and the US, this whole story also continues to have consequences. Now, for one, we're of course talking against the background of the US elections. We're talking just shortly after President Biden announced his withdrawal from the presidential race. And this will also have consequences, of course, for Israel. A weakened Biden administration will be seen in the Middle East as just that, as weakened, and this may invite more attacks by the Houthis and by all the other militias that we have mentioned earlier. Now, this poses a question for Israel. It seems, we don't have inside reporting on this, but it seems that either the US, the Biden administration, pressured Israel into not responding more forcefully against Yemen, and promising Israel, basically, on the other hand, that it will take care of the problem, which it obviously hasn't. Or Israel asked the US and asked other Western partners maybe to take care of this problem for Israel while Israel concentrates on the other fronts. Either way, the shocking drone strike on Tel Aviv that kills an Israeli a few days ago, and the following Israeli response in the Yemeni port of Hodeidah with massive strikes that we saw, show that this issue will continue to accompany us in the coming months ahead. And if you want to follow us on allisrael.com, we will bring you even more updates on this issue and all the other news regarding Israel and the larger region of the Middle East. Follow us on allisrael.com and our social media channels.